Thank you very much. Yes, I did grow up in this particular area. My family came from Texas back in 1950, and their background was cotton, and growing cotton, working in cotton fields in Texas, right along the Rio Grande River, right south along the border. About a year ago, March, typical man, opened my mouth about ideas, and I was I'm going to my Santa Cruz Valley historical meeting for that afternoon, and I walked in and I told the gals that were standing there, sitting there waiting for me, I said, "Ladies, have you seen the trees out there lately?" They said, "No, what's the story about the trees?" I said, "Do you see that they're just starting to bud right now? You know, the leaves are coming out and they're starting to bud out and do their normal thing that they do this time of year. But one row doesn't have anything on it. It's still dead as far as it looks like it's dead." I said, now, back in the good old days, there's such a thing as pecan trees missing their pollination cycle. And to compensate for that, FICO started planting what's the 9th row, which is called the pollinator row. "Oh, Oscar, we didn't know that. Why don't you start writing a story about all the stories you've been telling us about planting pecan trees and working on the cotton fields like you were back in the good old days as a young man growing up in Sahuarita?" So I said, "Oh my God, I'm in trouble again." My wife always tells me, "You don't know when to keep your mouth shut." I need this chair.
You may have that chair, sir.
Before I go any further, I want to recognize two special people in my life. And one is this young lady in here. Her name is Debbie Smith. And she taught with me at Sahuarita Elementary School. I was there for 22 years, and she was there making life happy for me. And she was a nice cohort to have in the building. And the other person I want to recognize is Garrett Ham. Where is Garrett? Garrett, stand up, please. Former student of mine back in his day. His mom and dad were teachers at the elementary school here at Sahuarita. And it's awesome to see my former students come out for these kinds of things and meet them on the street and so forth. So it's kind of neat. Well, anyway, this is how this story got about. And they said, "Why don't you start talking about the planting of pecan trees and how they came about and so forth." So we'll start with our presentation, Going Nuts. This presentation is not about going crazy. It's about the thinking in the process of transitioning from cotton farming to pecan orchards in the Santa Cruz River Valley. Cotton fields. We have a better picture of the one on the left. This is a cotton picker that has been adapted to work amongst the pecan trees. As you can see, there's shields. See the shields on the tires? That's to keep, if the tire happened to brush up or the cotton picker doesn't watch where he's going, that's to shield the tires from getting onto the trees and doing damage to the trees. That is an old Farmall tractor turned backwards. Now, the character here on this side, I don't know who he is. And I always had an issue with squirrels. Not an issue, but a thinking of squirrels. When we were planting the trees, I started seeing squirrels because I never really paid much attention to squirrels. But I thought, I wonder if 20 years from now, there are going to be more squirrels in the valley or not as a result of these trees being here. And I wondered, where are these squirrels coming from? Are they coming from the mountains, the Sahuarita Mountains? Because I rarely, when I, walking around cotton fields and so forth with the cultivators and walking out and doing what I was doing, chopping cotton, picking cotton, I didn't see much of squirrels. So I thought I should write a story about and do some research and do some, future experiments or more counting. How do I get to count whether there's really going to be a change of squirrels in this valley as a result of the fact that we have nuts around where they can eat? So I tell you what, then after that I finished working with Farmers Investment Company as a little kid. I went into the Army, spent 2 years in the Army, and then went into middle school, and then after that I just counted books and papers and kids and so forth. And I forgot about working on a scientific process on seeing if there would be, the environment would make a change on the numbers of squirrels we would have in the valley. So that was it. And now this cotton picker, the front part of it, the front part of the tractor, this is the back part of the tractor. The steering wheel is now in the back part of the tractor. All the equipment, the tractor has been turned around, and all the equipment and steering wheel have now been turned around so that we drive the tractor straight, with the back now being the front of the tractor. And it is kind of interesting in a change in dealing with that. Next one. Keith Walden was involved in agriculture in the early 40s in California before purchasing land in Arizona. He had worked on large citrus and avocado farms. Eventually, he acquired his own land and grew cotton, sugar beets, potatoes, and grains. This particular picture, all these three pictures were taken back in 1964, 56, 57. And if any of you know where Walden Grove High School is, okay, this is a field close to the entrance of the gunnery range. And back in the day when Mr. Harris owned the Sahuarita farm, he planted a lot of cotton in this particular area. And the gentleman happened to be an Air Force soldier, and he was good with a camera, and he went around the whole area taking pictures of what he was seeing all along. He got here when the cotton was in the process of being picked by machines. You can see what the real front of the cotton picker looks like. See how the wheels are exposed, whereas in the pecan fields they're covered, so to eliminate damage. Why aren't they all next to all these rows, and why is all this bare land right in there? It's a way that farmers in those days could keep a portion of their land fallow, and also at the same time they would be cultivating the field and moving the dirt around in the fields. And they were restricted in their cotton allotment. So rather than have many of their fields in fallow or not being used, they would split them up like this, and they would be counted. This part would be counted as a fallow, and this part would be part of their cotton allotment. But it was all done in one field. We want to give everybody a picture that while Keith was working, building up his business in California, the Santa Cruz Valley was thriving. We had a lot of things going on in the valley. Limo Ranch was planting a lot of cotton, which is north of the Pima Mine Road, which is now Pima Mine Road and the Nogales Highway. There was ranching, cattle ranches were around. This is lettuce farming was going on. This is a picture of a camp, a cotton picker camp around Sahuarita by the cotton gin that we have in that particular area, just east of the railroad tracks and the Sahuarita Road. We have a railroad station. Trains came through here. This picture was taken in 1914, so they were used to move ore from the mines up in the Twin Buttes area. We had little country stores in this particular area too. We move over here, and Mr. Manelos is a Greek immigrant, and he had a store and a bar at the corner of Sahuarita Road and the Nogales Highway. Here's a picture of the old school we had back in the day at the Sahuarita Elementary School. The original building of the school was done in 1915. Up to that particular point, we really don't know where any original other building was for the Sahuarita Elementary School. We know that the first teaching of school done in the area was back in the 1890s when Mr. What's his name? Brown. Mr. Brown. Blew my mind. Mr. Brown was from Ohio, and he started a cattle ranching operation of what is now, and his headquarters was right around now where the high school is, there in Sahuarita. He had a stagecoach ride that would run, stagecoach stop, that would be there available for all the people that were running between Tucson and the Nogales area. And his wife started teaching kids that worked for Mr. Brown on the ranch, and in the late 1890s, she was the first school teacher there for the district. And as far as having another permanent building, no one has ever given me any information that it was around until this one was put in 1915. Here's the activities going in 42, 43, 44 during World War II with the gunnery range. Next picture. This is a picture more in the Continental area. Mr. Bull had farm in this particular area. He did a lot of peanuts and vegetables. Small farmer. Here are his Quonset hut where he stored peanuts and a lot of his vegetables. We had the prisoner of war camp that was started back in 1944. That was only here for 16 months, starting in 44 and finished up in 46. The Continental Rubber Company was here, Continental School, and some of the irrigation that's going on in this particular area. In 1946, this is a map, aerial picture of 1958. You can see that now we have a dual mine road that connected this portion of Sahuarita down to what is now the Nogales Highway and the freeway, I-19. And now everybody calls this the old Nogales Highway, but that's not the old Nogales Highway. The old Nogales Highway ran on the east side of this particular area. Back in the late 30s and 40s, then the Nogales Highway was started, going all the way down to Continental and eventually crossing over and taking you to a halfway station. The road that goes in front of halfway station is the old Nogales Highway. And it's also the one that takes you to Kinsley Ranch. So a lot of things were going on in the 40s before Mr. Walden ever came to this particular area. With the cost of farming becoming more expensive in California, Mr. Walden sought industry experts, Sterling Hubbard of Yuma and Kemper Marley in the Salt River Valley. Their advice combined with his strategic thinking brought him to Arizona. In 1946, Walden had started Farmers Investment Company in California, and with additional capital from Harry Crown of Chicago, that's Harry Crown, money from him, he purchased the Santa Cruz Valley, 10,000 acres, a continental farm in 1949 from the Intercontinental Rubber Company. Reading a newspaper article that was written back in 1949, 10,000 acres, that's a lot of land, and only 2,000 to 3,000 were farmable. That's the continental part, all the way south of Continental and a little bit north of Continental to where about the housing development is, Quail Creek Road, that particular area, he got 10,000 acres, and only 2,000 were actually farmable. Reading a newspaper, the article that was written back in 1949, he said that the rest of the land that he had there was going to be eventually for winter housing, for people that wanted to come here during the winter. So you can imagine his thought back in the day when he bought the farm. This is the farm that the rubber company, Continental Rubber Company, bought and started. And they bought it for the reason of planting the guayule plant to produce a substitute for rubber. They produce a juice, a liquid that can be turned into rubber. And in World War I, the thinking was that the Germans would stop the flow of rubber coming in from Asia into the United States. So they experimented with guayule. Does anybody know what the Spanish word for rubber is? Huh?
Probably guayule.
Close. Ule. Ule. Ule is rubber, guayule. Now, I never experienced the guayule plant, so this was quite a few years before my time. Okay, so I never saw what it looked like, or I would never experienced it. Next one. The Continental farm had approximately 2,000 acres of farmable land that was primarily used to grow cotton. Sheep and eventually cattle were raised on the other acreage. In the late 50s, FICO increased its land holdings in central and southern Arizona. In addition to the 1958 purchase of the 4,780-acre Sahuarita farm from Jack Harris, he had property in Eloy, Picacho, and Aguila. Aguila is north of Wickenburg. And all these farms were added to the FICO holdings. In Aguila, which is north of Wickenburg, he primarily grew lettuce back in the 50s. And it was a big, huge farm too. He had about 15,000 acres over there. And the story is that in 1957-58, he and another guy by the name of Bud Antle. Bud Antle was a California farmer, and he knew how to ship vegetables across the United States. And together with Bud Antle, they harvested the lettuce crop, and they hit the market just right, at the right time. And he had money left over from the crop, and that he used as a down payment for the 4,700 acres here at Sahuarita back in 1958. My brother-in-law, I was raised by my brother-in-law and lived with my brother-in-law and an older sister. It's kind of interesting when looking through his papers that he had around. His paycheck for that year, his income tax papers, his W-2 forms, one half was from Harris Ranch and the other one was from FICO for that particular year. Back in the 60s, we started having a few barbecue gatherings during the 4th of July. And it was kind of interesting that watermelons were raised in Eloy. So for the 4th of July festivals, it was really neat to see that a couple of the trucks would come in with trailers full of watermelons. And man, everybody fought over all those watermelons that were coming in from Eloy. I had a personal relationship in a way with Mr. Walden. He was a nice man to work with, very energetic man. I said, Mr. Walden, I've been working too hard on this farm. I'm only 18 years old, and you've been out in the cotton fields during the day, and at nighttime I'm out here weighing the barley harvest in the front office, weighing the trucks, coming in with the trucks and so forth. Listen, Oscar, if a man's going to get anywhere in this life, he has to at least work 16 hours a day. Oh, come on, Mr. Walden. The other thing, he was always out there. He was out, you could see him riding around in his car, checking the cotton fields, checking his cattle operation that was in Green Valley and also in Continental and also in Sahuarita. And his car would get pretty darn dirty. So every now and then I would find myself, my brother-in-law would bring his car over to the house, and I said, what are you going to do with that car? He says, you're going to wash it. So I got to wash his car every now and then. 50 cents back in those days. Man, that was a lot of money for a 13 or 14-year-old to do. Another neat story I have to say about him. He knew all his workers. I never heard him talk anything negative about his foremen, his workers that he had. Some of them had lived in Continental and Sahuarita a long, long time, and he appreciated all of them. One time I was asked to take his car to Aguila. So I asked, well, how am I going to get back? Oh, you're going to get back with Mr. Walden in his airplane. His airplane? Whoa, that would be a neat treat for me. So I took his car up there, and And then it was time to leave. We left on the airplane. Well, it got dark. And I said, woo. I knew that his airstrip at Continental didn't have lights, so how are we going to land over there? So as it was, we landed in the Flowing Wells Airport, which was back in the day off of Prince Road. They had lights on it and everything else. So we got off the airport, and his wife was there waiting for us. And he said to me, hey, Oscar, I'm going to take you out to dinner. Where would you like to go eat dinner tonight? I said, Mr. Walden. To me, he was Mr. Walden. He was never Keith. You've had those kinds of experiences before, too, with people. But anyway, I said, Mr. Walden, I don't know anybody up in the Flowing Wells area. You know, I was raised in Sahuarita. I only know what's south of Ajo Way and Nogales Highway area. The reason I know about Ajo Way is we went to Pueblo High School. We didn't have a high school in my day, so we were bused to Pueblo High School, right north of Ajo Way. And I said, the only one that I can think of is Carichimaca. It's on Mission Road. He said, let's go there. So we went there and ordered the meal, sat down, and we ordered the meal and so forth. And his wife and Mr. Walden sat across from me. His wife looked at me and he says, where'd you get those beautiful teeth? I said, ma'am, you have to understand where I was raised. I was raised on FICO farm, and all that water that I drank that came out of FICO wells produced these teeth. I thought Mr. Walden was going to die. He thought that was the funniest story I'd ever said. Neatest story. And he was just choking from trying to laugh about his story. But anyway, I did enjoy the plane ride. The next time I got to go on this plane, again, we're going back to Aguila. I think I was out of the Army by then. And so we got up on the air and took off, and pretty soon he takes out his newspaper and starts reading the newspaper. Mr. Walden, don't worry, it's an automatic pilot. We'll be okay. Next one. In the late 50s, Mr. Walden began concerned with the future of the cotton industry. Synthetic fibers. Talk about my researcher coming up with a neat thing. Synthetic fibers. Nylons and rayon material. Synthetic fibers were rapidly becoming a cotton alternative, and countries outside the United States were producing more and more U.S. quality cotton. Verticillium wilt, picture on the lower left, a spore-based disease that developed in the surrounding desert and found a suitable home on the cotton plant, was becoming an increasing concern. It caused the cotton leaves to wilt, turn brown, and die. Farmers were also battling rust fungus, lower right photo, which made large orange lesions on the plant's leaves, eventually taking over the entire leaf surface. I remember walking through those cotton fields, and the leaves were wilted like this, and during that particular time, I was out there looking for bugs, bugworms on the cotton plant. And by the time I got to the end of the field, my pants and my Levi's, my pale-looking Levi's, were covered with this orange substance. And I, at the end of the field, had to brush that stuff off. And it was worse in Continental because it's closer to the desert, whereas Sahuarita is more open, and there's a lot of space beyond the desert being on both sides. But at Continental, it was common, limited. And so it was more, concentrated in that particular area. These diseases could destroy entire fields of cotton, and they were very expensive to control. Keith worried that the profitability of his farms would soon face a steep decline. Next one. Walden began experimenting with other agricultural options that would be profitable and thrive in the Arizona desert. He planted other varieties of cotton, fruit, nut trees, flowers, and grapes. He consulted with University of Arizona and other farmers in the area that had planted pecan trees. It was determined that grapes and pecans would be profitable choices, but pecans had the advantage because they could be harvested mechanically and had a longer window of harvest. The article up at the top, look when it was written on the left-hand side, February of '65. We had already started planting pecan trees, and the first batch of pecan trees were planted where La Posada is, okay? And one of the things that if you ever have an opportunity to really take a look at the pecan trees over there, that particular portion of the river, that particular portion of the land is close to the river, and it's good river bottom land. And man, those trees were planted in 1965, and look at the trunks of those trees. Huge. And the last batch was planted, and by that time I was in charge of the pecan crew. We planted the last batch of trees along Pima Mine Road and the Nogales Highway, north of there. And if you ever drive through there and look at those trees, the trunks are 5 years younger than the ones at La Posada, but the river bottom is not as fertile as it is in Continental. Fungus. Mr. Walden said he's going to lose $1 million as a result of this the wilt and also the rust. Can you imagine? 1965. How much did your car cost in 1955? Think about it today. Buy 3 houses in Green Valley, and how much have you spent? $1 million. Ice cream cones were only, 10 cents? My car that I bought in '69 was $2,000. $1 million back in 1965 was a heck of a lot of money. A long-range plan was developed to start with the planting of trees in the winter of '64-'65 and accomplished in the winter of '68-'69. Using farmable acreage of the Continental and Sahuarita farms, it was decided that 5,000 acres would be planted with seedlings. This particular tractor has an auger in the back of it. This auger went down the first time about 18 inches deep. Then it went down again, another 18 inches. And then it went down the third time, a little bit deeper, but then at that time it just popped up and flushed out all the dirt. Kind of thinking about the interesting, this is also a farm-oil tractor. See that thing right there on top? What do you suppose that is? Propane. Everything. Mr. Walden did not use gas. He converted all his equipment, including his pickup trucks, were all run with propane. So every morning when we left the barn, the farm headquarters, and we were out going to the field, we had to fill up our trucks with propane. Yes, sir. Why? Probably expense. It was cheaper. Secondly, if you have a farm that has 20 tractors over there and 30 tractors over there, I always thought, boy, we'd have a lot of fun siphoning gas out of tractors, wouldn't we? In the middle of the night and doing those kinds of, not that I would do it, but you never know. So I think a lot of it was an expense, and also having a gas tank around, facility, and then a way to dispose that, filling up your tractors every day with that. And I think that was a good, expense move on his part. He had about 4 tractors going during the planting season, going on at the same time. When we were planting 3,000 pecan trees a day, we'd only covered 30 acres, and that's a lot of trees to be put into the ground. Farm equipment, when we're getting the land ready and leveled off for planting where the pecan trees were going to be planted, those caterpillars were running 24 hours a day, back and forth, leveling, tilling the land, and also leveling it off for getting it ready for pecan trees.
Question?
Yes, sir.
The upper right corner picture, is that a mine tailing in the background?
The mine tailings were just starting, okay? Part of that is the mountain that you see, the Black Mountain, going by the Catholic Church, Santa Cruz Mission, as you're going north. I think that's a Black Mountain back over there. The first variety of trees planted were Western Schley. These easy-to-grow, hardy trees were not fussy about the soil and nutrition. They thrived through the long, hot Arizona summers. The small, long, tapered, thin-shelled, meaty nuts were very easy to crack. All pecan trees are self-pollinating, but every 4 or 5 years, the trees might miss their pollination cycle. To prevent the possibility of a less productive year, a late budding tree needed to be planted. In the early years, Barton or Bradley varieties were planted to compensate for this pollination feature. Western Schley trees were planted in the first 8 rows. The 9th row contained late blooming Barton or Bradley pollinators to compensate for the cycle of the Western Schley. You can see you have a better view of the mountains on the west side of Sahuarita. No tailings there. You notice that? We're looking west. Can you see anything else in here that would indicate that we're looking west? What feature can you notice that can tell you that you're probably looking west? I'm sorry?
Shadow.
The shadow. Shadow of what?
In the hole.
Yes, right. The hole. Okay? The sun is setting from this angle, and therefore it creates a shadow here. Eventually, what's going to happen is that little stakes are going to be put at the end of each one of these holes. Okay? And so that when it comes to centering the tree, they will be there. I don't know why the squirrel keeps showing up. I'm going to have to talk to my researcher who prepared this plan for me here. Researcher. Maybe, is there a way we can get the squirrel to talk in the picture and keep me out of it? Let it do all the talking. Have you ever broken a Western Schley nut? They're easy to crack. You get 2 or 3 of them in your hand, the palm of the hand, you can crack it. And it's kind of easy to do. It wasn't until these years that I found out about pecan pie. What a novelty. Never. Oh man, did I realize I'm sucker. I'm a sweet tooth man anyway, but woo, pecan pie. Now I'm getting to the point where I bake my own pecan pies. And I baked a pecan pie one day, and I made the crust out of lard. And this little girl asked her mother, "Mom, that pecan pie tasted a little bit different. What was it?" He used lard on the crust. Ooh, I didn't think anybody would be able to notice that there is a difference between shortening and lard when you do that. It makes a difference when it comes to refrying your beans. I can tell you that much. Lard in. Okay. 3 years into the planting cycle, the Wichita was introduced. The new tree was more productive than the others and quickly became the main variety planted in the 8 consecutive rows. The Western Schley then became the pollinator in every 9th row. Every 9th row, when it came to the Hispanic workers, Mexican workers that we worked there, we had a special word for the 9th row. We called it el macho. What's a macho mean? A what?
Manly.
Manly one. That provided the pollination part. Okay, the manly one. And then macho. All right. You get a better picture of the cotton picker as opposed to what we saw on the front page. And a better picture of my squirrel eating the nuts. Okay. Can you tell that that's a little tree? I wonder what happened for that tree to have to be replaced there. Because when you think about these trees over here, they're much larger than this one here. Those trees at this particular stage, I think, are about 4 years old. Okay? Probably one of the original trees that were planted there in the beginning. The trees planted came from Stallman Farms in the Mesilla Valley, near Las Cruces, New Mexico. In addition to the trees planted on the 5,000 acres of FICO farmland, Dean Stallman, who started his pecan orchard in 1932, provided invaluable advice and information to Keith Walden. This is the Mesilla farm for Mr. Stallman, and he provided all those trees that we planted in those 5 years back then. Next one. The Santa Cruz Valley planting season started right after the New Year and lasted approximately 6 weeks, only interrupted by the temperature, which had to stay above freezing in order to protect the fragile root systems. 3,000 trees arrived daily, 6 days a week. This amount covered approximately 30 acres. A crew of 50 men planted 8 rows at a time. We had water tanks, and there were 4 water tanks, and they would ride down the middle of the row, and they had hoses on each side. So one hose went to one row, one hose went to the other one, and of course the rows were 30 feet apart, so the tractor went down the middle. And they provided water for planting the pecan trees. This is a picture of Continental, a map picture of Continental. There's Continental right there, and that's where we planted the first majority of the trees. This is where La Posada is right now, in there. And here is the Continental, the town of Continental. When you get down this further down here, you're going to be pretty close to La Canoa Ranch. Notice the trees. There was a hard cardboard, a hard plastic piece of material wrapped around the tree to keep critters from coming over and chewing on it during the night, and also maybe some of the squirrels, like the ones sticking around there and there. And also it protected the bud. The bud section of it had to be protected. It was, when it was planted, it had to be facing north, away from the sun. Yes, ma'am.
How tall were your seedling trees? How tall is that plastic?
I never saw it that tall. I'm curious as to myself where that picture came from, in order to show you some of the things that we did on here, or were done by Farmers Investment Company. But that picture might have come from somewhere else. You'll see a little bit later that the trees that we planted went 3 feet down in the ground, 3 feet above the ground. And Mr. Walden made use of things that you would never believe you could use. For example, we moved a lot of cotton trailers up and down the road, went to Maricopa, or bringing cotton from Maricopa, or moving to Marana to move cotton to be ginned in Marana. At one time, stacks of airplane tires were brought over to the shop. It turned out that the plane tires were the same size as the ones that went on the cotton trailer. And we were using old, used airplane tires on those cotton trailers. Talk about Mr. Walden and his innovative and thinking skill. The next thing on this, newspapers. The old printing press I found out he would bring these pieces of plastic, hard plastic mats. To me, they were like mats, but you could see the printing of the newspaper on it. And they were soft enough that then we could cut them in half and then wrap them around the tree and with wired them all together. So a lot of that stuff was recycled, I would say would be the appropriate word for it. And Mr. Walden was good at recycling in that regards. The fields had been readied with 3 feet deep holes and staked to ensure the alignment of trees. A tree was placed in every hole. One individual held a tree next to a crossbar approximately 6.5 feet long that spanned the hole and centered the trees between the stakes on each side of the hole. You can kind of see a mark there. And the bar that we used, and I could never find a replica of it, was aluminum bar, and it had a cross on the middle of it. And then the stakes were on each side of the hole, little wood stakes, and the bar was centered on that, and the tree was held by one person right in the middle of that little V. One individual held a crossbar, approximately 6.5 feet long on each side. Another individual held a 2-inch hose to supply water into the hole. 3 others shoveled dirt and filled the hole around the trees. Then on to the next hole. The process was repeated for each of the 8 rows being planted at the same time. See how good we were back in those days at planting them straight in a row? Lined up nicely. Newspaper articles showed these trees, this picture taken back in 1980. So hard to say which particular field it was, but if the last tree was planted in 1969, 68, 69, so they're approximately anywhere from 10 to 15 years old here, depending upon which part of the farm we're looking at. Irrigation, water wells provided the water, and these trees now, nothing is planted in between the rows, and they're doing a little bit of wider irrigation as opposed to the flood irrigation where now there's nothing in the middle now, and in some areas they're watering the whole span between the two trees. These are pictures of the trees that have been pruned and nice and straight. You can see part of this picture I took a year ago March, and you can see where this particular tree is already budding and it looks more full of leaves than this one here, which is then becomes a late pollinator. Nice rows too there, huh? Nicely spaced trees. We did good work back in those days. Next picture. The fields marked out, and each row was spaced 30 feet. Within each row, a tree was planted every 15 feet, and in some fields, the distance was 18 feet. This picture here shows you a plan on how they were done. 8 rows of one specific variety, and then your pollinator tree, every 8th row. Next one. The trees planted were 3/4 of an inch thick in diameter and budded with a selected variety. Each tree was approximately 6 foot long. 3 feet went below the ground level and 3 feet above. The individual centering the tree had to ensure that the bud was at least 6 inches above the ground and facing northeast for sunburn protection. Where the researcher found this picture, I don't know, but it's a good example of what we want, of what we did. Mulch? No, we didn't have any mulch. We just threw dirt in there. But we added these basins. After the tree was planted, then these little mounds or basins were put on each side of the tree for irrigation. And then in between the next row, then there was plenty of ground so that we could plant cotton or barley or wheat during the growing season. Here's a picture of young trees that were planted. When this picture was taken, the trees are kind of young. You can still see the distance between the rows. And it looks like it's facing north. That must be Green Valley area. Next one. Three FICO trucks were used to transport trees from Las Cruces to Sahuarita and Continental. One truck would be in the planting operation unloading the trees. One truck would be arriving in Arizona with a load for the next day. The last truck would be on its way to Mesilla Valley to be loaded with new trees. This tree here is approximately 10 to 12 years old. Okay. Here's Mr. Toops Culbertson, Mr. Walden's right-hand man, holding a pod, branch of pecans. And the pecan trees grow in buds or bunches of 3 to 5 as they hang on the tree. Okay. This one here, I don't know where it came from, but it kind of gives you an idea of probably what they did in Stallman Farms. Because we were throwing the trees off of the truck. The truck was about the size of the service truck that you saw on there before. And they were like a 1-ton truck with a big box built in the back of it. And they just piled them up on top, and a portion of the truck trees were separated between the pollinator tree and the variety that was wanted at that particular time. This picture is taken facing north. Look how close the trees are now. There. This is Tucson back there. That's Push Ridge back there. And you can see where the pecan plant is started there. Sahuarita Elementary School, the original one, was right behind the pecan plant right there. Next picture. In the winter of 68-69, the last major planting of trees was accomplished, covering 5,000 acres between Sahuarita and Continental and 1,000 acres in Pinal County. It had been calculated that around 500,000 trees were planted. Laurel Clark recalls the population of Tucson was around 500,000, which equated to 1 tree for each person living in Tucson at that particular time. This is Laurel Clark. He was an employee with Farmers Investment Company. He came in 1967, and as he was driving north from Tucson to Nogales, he said to his brother, "Hey, looks like they're planting some trees out there. Look at all this stuff that's going on out there." So he told his brother, "Let's stop there at the office in Sahuarita and see who we can talk to." So the secretary took a message because Mr. Walden or Toops were there, and they called him up and said, "Yeah, come in for an interview." So they hired him. He was 27 years old at the time, and a couple of years ago he just quit working, and he was 82. He's 80 at that time. 2 years ago he was 82 years old. He was a horticulturist, and his specialty were trees. That's a processing plant, cleaning plants back here, processing plant. You're looking north and west. This is the back over here where Santa Vera Mission is, and that Black Hill, I call it the Black Hill, off of Mission Road. I don't know whether any of you have ever noticed it. No? Okay. And one of the neat things is, I like this picture, is see these little white buildings right back there? That's what we use. If anybody mentions to you the cotton camp or the migrant workers camp, That's where it was, back in that area off of what is now the Pecan plant area. A bunch of little houses are now in here. Mr. Walden donated land for Sahuarita employees and Continental employees back in the early 70s so that they could have, how many of you have ever heard of Project PEP? P-E-E-P? Run by John Arnold. And John Arnold got a grant from the federal government to use a migrant bus and take it to the migrant camps and teach people the English, teach them how to read English and write English. And also, he got into this project that maybe we can help the migrant work or the employees on the farms to have their own housing. Mr. Walden donated land for the employees to have their houses built through this particular project. Yes, ma'am?
Oscar, is that where the camp is back there, is that where San Martin is now?
No.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I will show you a picture later of where San Martin is in relation to that. And very few of those buildings exist today. Back before FICO bought, this is a personal story, and I love to tell this story. Back in the day, in the 50s, early 50s, when these buildings were being built, an African-American gentleman was talked. Back in those days, there were a lot of recruiting of people to come and live in Sahuarita and work on the farms, or in Arizona in general, not just Sahuarita. But this particular guy went to Arkansas and he talked to a lot of workers in Arkansas. And he brought with him a number of African-American families back in the early 1950s. This particular person, one person that he brought, was a preacher in Arkansas. And when he came to Arizona, he told the boss man at that particular time before FICO, I was a preacher back in Arkansas. Can I have one of those little buildings that is just sitting there doing nothing so that I can preach to my people on Sunday? He says, you certainly can. The African-American man was talking to Toops one day, Mr. Walden's right-hand man. And he said, Mr. Toops, I have to have Sunday morning off. John, why do you need Sunday morning off? So that I have an opportunity to preach to my people about the Bible and about God. He says, okay, John, 12:30, I want you ready to go to work on Sunday. You can't have the whole day off. To this day, it's still in existence. Started in 52 by this African-American man. And I had an opportunity to work with that African man on the farm, mending fences, chopping cotton, picking cotton, doing all kinds of things. And I would say, Mr. Austin, again, gentleman respectedly called Mr. Austin to me. And they said, Mr. Austin, how about singing for me today? I expect a rock and roll music from an African-American. He started gospel music. Mr. Austin, that's not what I want. I don't want church music. Little kids, we would walk by that place on Sundays. And when, of course, we hear a lot of hallelujahs. To us, it was the hallelujahs going to church in the morning. So finally one day, one of the workers, a Hispanic man, asked me, he said, what do you call them hallelujahs for? We always hearing hallelujahs. Do you know what hallelujah means? No. Praise to God. Gracias a Dios. Oh my, I never thought about that. But we call them the hallelujahs. And that church is still in existence. And that's a neat thing that you kind of appreciate a farmers investment company and the people who started it and managed it. After planting in each field, next one, borders were made on each side of the rows of trees for irrigation. While the planting of the trees was so close to each other, it was thought that the growth and production would be slow. And not wanting the land to be idle between rows of trees, some cotton, wheat, and barley were planted. That's a picture of Mr. Culbertson, Toops Culbertson, Warren Culbertson. Yes, ma'am?
Wouldn't the trees shade out the crops that were interplanted?
I'm sorry?
Wouldn't the trees shade out the crops that were interplanted?
No, they still get plenty of, they were so small. See how short they are? Small? Yeah. No, they wouldn't affect it in any way. And of course, we're only looking at 2 or 3 years that this farming in the planting in between the trees was done. That's a picture of Mr. Culbertson in his later years. He worked me to death as a young man. He had me do a lot of variety of jobs. I learned how to weld in high school, so guess what? I got to work on the welding shop. I was taught to run a cotton picker, and so he had me out running all the way from Sahuarita to Continental, Paca float to pick cotton not on a machine. When the barley was being harvested, he had me work at night time. At 5 o'clock, the lady at the clerk that they had at the office went home. At 5 o'clock, I was there at the door to continue for the next 2-3 hours weighing barley trucks in so they could go in and out. He had me doing petiole samples to go through the cotton fields and chop off portions of the leaf to send them off to chemical office in Casa Grande so we could determine what the nitrogen content was or what kind of more or less fertilizer we should use for the cotton plants. He had me doing soil samples. I had to go around all the cotton fields to do soil samples. I had to go all the way to Maricopa, out there by Casa Grande area, and do petiole samples over there too. So many a time, particularly in the summertime, I was taking a class at the university, a summer class, and I knew I had to go to Maricopa, so I'd take the pickup truck. And everybody would ask me, he said, what are you doing with a FICO truck over here at the university? I said, hey, I'm on my way to Maricopa for the day as soon as my class is over. So I appreciate this man, Mr. Culbertson. He also had the same work ethic as Mr. Walden. You would see him out there. He would park his car. He never drove a truck. He would drive his Volkswagen. And many a time you would see that little Volkswagen plowing through the field going to check on something. But anyway, most of the time he'd leave it parked out there, out in left field somewhere, and you could see him walking through all the cotton fields, walking through the pecan trees. He wanted to have a first-hand experience of what was going on. He knew everyone's name, and he respected all his workers too. Okay, what year were these pictures taken?
74.
When did we start planting pecan trees? 64, 65. So, how old are these trees now in 74? Yeah. And by this time we had completed all the planning that was going to be done. Here's Continental. Let's start with Continental. La Posada is right in this area right here. Here's the road that takes you to the freeway, Continental Road. Okay? This is the Nogales Highway. What's happening now to the east side of the Nogales Highway? The east side would be your right side. What? Housing. No more trees on this side, right? Occasionally you get to see, every time I go down there Nogales Highway, occasionally I see trees out there amongst those houses over there. Have you noticed that too? Pretty close to the railroad tracks. So some of the trees were left in there, but it's all housing now. FICO had its feedlot right there. Stinky place. On a rainy day in muggy Arizona in July, August, I could stand in Sahuarita and the wind be blowing north, and you could definitely get a whiff of all that cow manure. I didn't use that other four-letter word. Okay. Here's Green Valley now. 60, early 60s, so it's about 14, 15 years old at that particular time. And trees were planted where now a lot of Green Valley is on the west side of the river, along the river. And now it's all housing. We moved to the Sahuarita area. Here's Sahuarita Road. Okay? And here's where the pecan plant would be. You asked about San Martin de Porres. This road right here, this one right here, is the old Nogales Highway. And how far south does it go? It goes further south on the left-hand side of the gravel pit that's down here off of the Nogales Highway. The Nogales Highway, old Nogales Highway, travels all over there on that particular part. This is where San Martin de Porres is, right there. And it used to be a feedlot too. Yes, ma'am?
Is that pecan orchard still the largest pecan orchard in the United States?
I can't really answer that for you because when you think about how much land we've lost to housing, and you think about the fact that I don't know whether I explained it or not, but Mr. Walden, when he lived in California, probably another picture will show up, he was also interested in housing development in California, in Pasadena, California. He probably owned some land over there that he had developed or allowed to have housing development on there. Another neat story on that part is that in with San Martin de Porres, my sister was involved with the committee. I had a sister that was 14 years older than me, and raised me because mom died when I was 2 years old, and she took over me. And she told me a story about how she went to talk to Mr. Walden about donating land, since he had donated land for houses. How about donating some land for a church, San Martin de Porres, because we were using the old Sahuarita elementary school building. And he says, okay. But my sister was rather impressed when Mr. Walden brought out this big piece of paper. And he started leafing through the paper. Well, it was a housing development plan that he had developed with house builders back in those days. And he told my sister, okay, this is where we have a section set out for churches. And where does it go back to? I started reading the newspapers, especially when he said that he bought Continental, and what was going to happen to those extra 10,000 acres? They were going to go to winter homes. So, and the other thing, my conjecture is, it's only my conjecture. It's nobody else's. I haven't asked anyone, nor have I discussed it with anyone. I have a feeling that for Mr. Walden, planting pecan trees was going to be an experiment. And if that experiment didn't work out, who was going to take over Sahuarita? Who? Housing. How far away are we from that? I'm sorry?
Is that still the plan? Is that still the plan?
I meant my conjecture. I don't know because I haven't. But when you think about what is happening and how much land has been now designated and bought out and so forth, it's still happening. Next one. Due to the fast growth of trees after 12 to 14 years, every other tree in the row was eliminated, and in time, every other row was taken out. Therefore, some rows have trees 30 by 30, others are 60 by 60. See how thick the growth is here? And now some of these have been eliminated and pruned, so they allow for more. Here's a picture of all lined out with Sahuarita and Continental. Okay, one thing I didn't, look at the new thing about Nogales Highway. What's this little curve right here?
Yeah,
What is it?
going around the railroad track.
Going around the railroad tracks. Why was that? Why did that have to be done?
They were gonna build a bridge. They were gonna build a bridge.
Originally, what the thought was that they were going to make an overpass over the railroad track. And they were going to run it right over the crossing there in Sahuarita. Well, the reason they had to do that is because they put a stoplight there. And it would back up. When the train was rolling back and forth, the traffic would line up on the Sahuarita Road and the Nogales Highway going east, north, and south. So they had to figure out of a different option other than an overpass, and this was the best way to do it. Now, one of the neat things about this particular region, this little area in here, is Once you cross the Sahuarita Road going south, you end up in what we call this little strip in here, Bull property. Mr. Bull was a farmer where Quail Creek is. That was all his land. And he also had land just south of Sahuarita Road. If you go down there, if you go going north on Sahuarita Road, on the Nogales Highway, you notice that there's a yellow fence post. That's where Mr. Bull's property started, and it bordered the Nogales Highway, and it went to Sahuarita Road. FICO bought that land, and he put trees in there. Now, one of the neat things about it is, that I enjoy about it, he started putting, when they planted those trees, they put them with sprinklers. Second thing is, have you noticed the spacing of the trees as you go around there? As you go around that little curve? And when you cross the Nogales Highway, when you cross the Sahuarita Road on the Nogales Highway, if you quickly look to your right, you will see an irrigation ditch. And then you can compare the trees that are on Bull's property and also on the old Sahuarita property that we planted back in 66, 67, 68. And the size of those trees, the Bull Ranch ones are small, and the other ones are much bigger on the other side of the irrigation ditch. So keep that in mind as you drive through Sahuarita. Next picture. As trees continue to grow, shading is increased. Pecan trees are more productive when there is more sunlight around than shade. There's a reason why trees are pruned regularly. As a result, 1/4 of the trees are pruned every year. Another issue that needed to be addressed was the height of the tree. Therefore, the trees were topped so that the shaking of the tree would be more effective in getting the nuts to fall and to control shading. You've probably seen these vehicles out there, right? Topping the trees off. Guess what's been one of my big benefits, being associated, rubbing elbows with the FICO people? What do you think it is? What? Oh, I get it all free. So, all of that, I love the pruning of the trees because I can partake in that. What's happening with a lot of the big wood that is coming off of these trees? Anybody know? Big, what do you call it? Chainmen, chainsaws are cutting up the wood, putting them on trucks and shipping them out. Whether they're being used in restaurants, whether they're being used for furniture or whatever, I really don't know. But a lot of that wood is being sent out, and I can only have the leftovers. Yes, ma'am. Somebody had a question?
Yeah, I'm a small-time woodworker, and I tried to use pecan. It is hard as a rock.
Amen. It is. But it's beautiful.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yes.
No question about it.
Yep.
I have a very nice board I like to look at. I am not going to cut it up, though.
You said broad or board?
Board.
There I am, ma'am, Mrs. Smith. Don't know when to keep my mouth shut. Yeah. This is new machinery. This is the new operation. Sweeper, cleaning up by making rows. This is the picker, picking it up. And this is a height, and this is a shaker. Okay, next one. These are workers at the processing plant. The processing plant, of course, has been closed now. That big, long building that you see along the Sahuarita Road is a refrigerator. All it does is when they clean the nuts, they store them there, and then they're sourced out to be processed. They don't do any more breaking, packaging of pecans. Yes, ma'am?
Where do they send them to be processed?
I have no idea on that part. I'm not involved with that. Joe. Yeah. Yeah. So this is how they look like when they come out of the process cleaning plant. See this old one? Back when they started, this is a shaker with a net. So when the trees were being shaken, then they would fall on this net and fall down in the container. And then other people would come by and pick up by hand what was left on the ground. Originally, at the first time when the nuts really started coming down, then they used pickers, hand pickers, to go out and pick the cotton. This building here is now the maintenance building for Farmers Investment Company. It used to be used back in the 50s for storing cottonseed after the cotton was shipped out into bales and the seed was saved for other good stuff like salad oil. In the 60s, when I was growing up there, then they were being used to store the barley, sorghum for the cattle as feedlot. Yes, sir.
As long as you were talking about the processing, we had always heard that you needed a good freeze before you could shake the nuts. We didn't have one this year. We heard they used some kind of chemical.
As far as I know, no chemical. They just had to wait for it to do. Yeah, we're waiting for a good freeze.
There
Yes,
was no freeze.
no freeze. But eventually they will wilt and die and fall down. We have a picture here of the whole thing. Seedlings, flowering, pollination, the development. Here's the pods, 3 to 5. The harvesting, the raking. This is the what part? This is the part everybody complains about, right? Why? Dust. Yeah. And the shaking of the tree, harvesting. Now, before they used to have little trailers to move the nuts all the way to cleaning plant. But now they're dropped off at a field next to this truck, and then they're put on a truck and they're moved by the truck. So that there are no more trailers or no more trucks taking, little trucks taking nuts to the cleaning plant. Here's the processing, the pruning, and of course your nuts. This concludes my knowledge, my experience, my participation in the planting of pecan trees. And other than that, beyond that, I can't tell you very, very much other than the fact that I was very honored when Tubes Culbertson asked me one day, because I used to visit him a lot. He meant a lot to me. He was a mentor to me. And he said, "Do you ever think about coming back to FICO?" Tubes, I have never left FICO. If there are 3, tattoos that I should have on my body, one has to do FICO, Sahuarita Elementary School, and farming. So that was about it. He got a big kick out of that one. And my experience growing up in FICO and the things that I learned and the people I worked with benefited me very much in my adult life. And Debbie can be a testament to that, and so can Mr. Clark over here. Mr. Ham over here. Yes, sir.
One thing that you've left a question in my mind about is the trees are grafted onto roots. What is the root?
I have no idea. That I never asked. So that I can tell you. You know who will probably tell you? The internet. Yes, ma'am.
My brother works for FICO, and he said the pecans go to El Paso.
For processing? Okay.
Most of them go to El Paso and other
Okay.
companies.
I open my mouth wherever I go. One time I was in Boise, Idaho at a Whole Foods store. And the man was filling up the canisters with nuts. And I went up to the man and I said, "Hey, do you by any chance know where these pecans came from?" I have no idea. Why do you ask? Well, I was raised I worked in a cotton farm back in my younger days, but then it became a pecan farm. And I wonder where all these pecans go that Farmers Investment this company is processing nowadays. He says, well, I really don't know. So I look over and here's his wagon, his cart. And guess what was on top of it? Boxes of pecans that said Santa Cruz Valley pecans. Unbelievable. And I told that story to Toops. He says, you go around stores doing that kind of stuff? How else do I know, find out what things are going on? So, anyway. Thank you for your time.